From devastating floods to ground-shattering earthquakes, find out which natural disaster still plagues us today, more than 6 years after it occurred. Number 10. Hurricane Katrina, 2005. Hurricane Katrina did a lot of damage when it made landfall in the southern United States. Touching down in 2005, this hurricane ripped up the Gulf Coast and wrecked everything in its path. Being the 6th strongest hurricane that has ever hit the United States at the time, Katrina really managed to land a few shots on the jaw of the red, white, and blue. The casualty count alone made Katrina a true tragedy, but the physical damage that the ocean storm caused also made it a financial disaster. Over $81 billion in damages have been directly attributed to the hurricane, making it one of the most expensive natural incidents that the United States has ever had to grapple with. And cleanup was not easy, nor was moving past the disaster. Over 1 million residents were estimated to have been displaced as a result of this event. Even to this day, most Americans still remember Katrina, and that's for a reason. Number 9. Haiti Earthquake. Thousands of earthquakes strike countries all over the world every year. Most of the seismic activity is harmless and doesn't do anything that's worth the notice of anyone but seismologists. Occasionally, however, the planet gives us a wake-up call and reminds us that it's very, very much alive underneath our hills. Even having said that, an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.0 is extremely rare and insanely powerful. Terrifyingly so, actually. But this level of earthquake was exactly what ripped through Haiti back on January 12th of 2010. With an epicenter that was located just off the southwest section of Port-au-Prince, the earthquake rattled Haiti with around 59 additional aftershocks that ranged between a 4.2 and a 5.9 magnitude in strength. Around 200,000 people died that day. 2 million were struck homeless in a single moment, and 3 million found themselves in need of emergency assistance. That said, the world responded amiably to this tragedy, and millions of US dollars were dedicated to the Haiti Relief Fund. Number 8. European heat wave of 2003. Europe isn't a hot place. The people of the continent just aren't used to scorching heat or sizzling hot summers. The European lifestyle, society, and the economy are all centered around this fact in ways that most people would never even notice. However, when the European heatwave of 2003 smacked Europe with all of its hot fury, a crisis erupted. Health concerns were raised all over the continent. Droughts even struck multiple countries, resulting in crop shortages everywhere. The Ukraine and the countries around it were especially hit hard, with the former country losing over 75% of its wheat crop. The drought was so bad that there were actually casualties resulting from the heatwave. A number of senior citizens simply couldn't take the weather and passed away, along with some who had never had need of air conditioning units and did not have other means to cool down their core body temperature. There hasn't been a summer that has been hotter than 2003 in Europe since 1540, and even that's debatable. The 2003 heat wave was certainly one of the worst surprise natural attacks to happen in the 2000s, and until all of the smoke cleared, nobody even expected how bad it was going to be. Number 7. Afghanistan Blizzard of 2008. Agonizing heat isn't the only thing Mother Nature can cook up to throw at humanity. Sometimes crackling cold can be just as bad, if not worse, than the sun deciding to bear down on everything and everyone under its fiery gaze. Back in the winter of 2008, a blizzard, almost unlike anything that's ever been seen in modern history, loudly whipped itself up into a fury over the skies of Afghanistan. Temperatures in the region fell to below minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, and over 70 inches of snow were recorded to have fallen in the Middle Eastern country. The cold was so chilling that a great number of people froze to death. Over 1,337 people, give or take a few, are estimated to have died due to this freak storm. As was mentioned a moment ago, some of these casualties have been attributed to people being frozen solid by the chill, while others were caused by people becoming trapped in their vehicles and shelters by snowdrifts. Among the Afghan people that did survive, a number were struck even harder still, with numerous frostbite amputations having to take place. In fact, over 100 amputations were reported in medical stations across the country. The damage to livestock was also staggering, and in a society that depends on livestock to eat, like Afghanistan does, this is a big deal. Number 6. Bola Cyclone 1970. Hurricanes, tsunamis, and cyclones are some of the deadliest phenomena on this planet. The Bola cyclone, however, was an especially vicious storm system that decided to take its wrath out on Bangladesh back in the 1970s. The storm lashed out at the Indian city with windy arms that cracked and spun up to 115 miles per hour. The storm was so horrendous that over 85% of the homes in the area where the cyclone tore through were left in shambles, leaving those who survived its fury homeless. To make matters worse, it also summoned up a number of powerfully destructive storm surges that swallowed entire coastal villages without any semblance of mercy. The total death toll of this single storm is estimated somewhere near 500,000 people. Number 5. Aleppo Earthquake of 1138. One of the deadliest earthquakes ever recorded in the history of mankind. The Aleppo earthquake is often ranked somewhere between the third and first most gruesomely powerful shaking of the earth ever recorded. The earthquake is named after the city in which it occurred, which happens to be the capital of what is now Syria. The quake first began to rumble within the depths of the earth on the 11th of October, 1138. A small quake gave warning to this coming disaster a day before. Once the quake began to rock Aleppo, it crumbled the entire city to the ground, striking columns and pillars into dust and crushing foundation with the weights of the buildings that had previously sat harmoniously atop them. By the time it was all said and done, the city of Aleppo was left traumatized and destroyed by what was no doubt interpreted as a message from the Syrian gods themselves. Over 230,000 were counted among the dead of this single tragedy in Aleppo. That said, all the accounts that we have of the Aleppo disaster are quite dated, and the death toll there could have been much worse. We just don't know. One thing is for sure though, this earthquake was the kind of travesty that the earth has very seldom seen since. Number 4. Hurricane Andrew 1992. Hurricane Andrew came into being quite humbly. A single tropical wave flowed off the west coast of Africa on August the 14th of 1992. From such a simple beginning to a storm that would cause the world to shake at its eventual fury, on August 16th of that year, the small tropical wave that had left the coast of Africa had formed into a tropical depression, picking up steam and force as it went. It was then that the world began to take notice of this once humble wave. At first, Andrew's power was drawn off by wind shear and its growth was stunted, but unfortunately, this was a temporary save. For over the next few days after becoming a major tropical depression, the storm system began to grow larger and larger and started to spin faster and faster. By this time, Andrew was set on a collision course with the United States. Its intentions were clear. It was going to hammer the North American coast with the gale force of 1,000 freight trains. In the end, Andrew caused 65 fatalities and around $26 billion in property damages. Needless to say, Hurricane Andrew's name was soon retired, as, at the time it struck, it was the 6th costliest hurricane to ever hit the continental United States. Number 3. Nevado del Ruiz Volcano Eruption. The volcano eruption of Nevado del Ruiz was not that powerful. If one were only looking at the eruption at mere strength alone, then almost no one except an expert would have expected it to cause so much terrifyingly bad damage. Unfortunately, the Nevado del Ruiz volcano did anything but erupt quietly. Shortly after the volcano exploded, a great rush of powerful, fast-moving, and merciless mudflows descended its cliffs. The mudflows then spilled out from the volcano like dogs of war, crushing and biting down on anything in its path. Tragically, at the end of it all, nearly 25,000 people lay dead. This makes the eruption one of the most tragic and costliest to ever strike Colombia. Number 2. Indian Ocean Earthquake. The Indian Ocean earthquake was one of the most powerful earthquakes that had ever registered on the Richter scale. As its name suggests, the quake struck within the waters of the Indian Ocean and thus didn't initially do much damage. Also, despite coming in at a magnitude of 9.15 on the Richter scale, the Indian Ocean earthquake only lasted about 10 seconds. At first glance, it appeared that no one would be hurt, and that was a lucky thing too, since such a terribly powerful shaking of the earth would have devastated most countries from the earthquake alone. Unfortunately, this line of thinking couldn't have been more wrong. The quake, you see, may not have lasted very long, but it shook the ocean with enough force to create a massive tsunami that collided with all the nearby shores around where the earthquake had occurred. Indonesia, Sri Lanka, South India, and even South Africa were all hit with brute force, either directly or with bad weather. All in all, somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 people died, all because of that one earthquake. The power of the tsunami it created exponentially increased its destructive force and its reach. Number 1. Tohoku Earthquake and Tsunami. In 2001, the strongest earthquake to ever hit Japan struck the country. With a magnitude of 9.0, it was unlike anything that the Japanese had ever seen before or since. The quake itself killed thousands, but the tsunami waves that it generated boosted the casualties it caused up to almost 20,000 people. Thousands more were injured or needed medical assistance. The number of people who lost their homes was staggering. Even more so was the number of people who went missing that day. The Tohoku earthquake was, without a doubt, one of the worst things that the Japanese had ever had to face as a country or society. Unfortunately, though, the destruction did not stop there. The earthquake and the tsunami had damaged a nuclear power plant of Fukushima, causing it to leak highly radioactive water directly into the Pacific Ocean at a rate of 300 tons per day. That radioactive water could not be directly contained, and it still plagues the wildlife of the ocean today. Long-term effects of this continued radiation leak have only been estimated, as the currents in that area are so strong that the contamination has moved far into the depths of the Pacific Ocean. Know any disasters that you think should have made the cut? Feel free to let us know in the comments below, and don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.